the hidden heartbeat of the company. Malik Johnson stood in the corner of his lavish office, staring at the city skyline as the sun dipped below the horizon. The orange and pink hues often inspired him, reminding him of his journey from humble beginnings to becoming the CEO of Vision Corp, one of the nation's leading tech firms. But today, the view felt different, hollow. His eyes drifted back to the damning employee satisfaction report on his desk. 15% drop in employee satisfaction, a glaring red flag. For the third consecutive quarter, complaints had poured in about a toxic work environment at the Virginia office. Whispers of favoritism, racial bias, and employee burnout echoed louder each month. Malik's jaw tightened. He had built Vision Corp on principles of equality, innovation, and respect. How had his vision been so thoroughly derailed? He sank into his chair, flipping through the stack of anonymous complaints. Lines jumped off the page. Management doesn't care about us. Promotion is impossible unless you're in the right circle. Racism is alive here. We're overworked and ignored. The words pierced through Malik's carefully constructed image of his company. This wasn't just a problem. It was a crisis. He felt a surge of guilt. Was his distance from the day-to-day operations to blame? He reached for the intercom to call his assistant but stopped. No delegation could fix this. He needed to understand what was happening on the ground. That evening, Malik made the boldest decision of his career. The plan. Malik sat in his study that night, a laptop glowing before him. He scrolled through a collection of disguises from an online costume store. His mind was set. He would go undercover. Not as an executive, not even as a mid-level manager, but as a receptionist. The idea was as terrifying as it was unconventional. If word got out, it could shatter his credibility. But Malik was determined. After finalizing his disguise, cheap slacks, a white button-down shirt, wire-rimmed glasses, and a neatly trimmed fake beard, Malik stared at his reflection. Gone was the sharp, confident CEO. In his place stood an unassuming office worker. It was both humbling and unsettling. The next morning, Malik arrived at the Virginia office. The sleek glass doors reflected his new persona back at him. Michael Fields, temporary receptionist. He adjusted his glasses, took a deep breath, and stepped inside. Day 1. The first impressions. The lobby buzzed with the early morning rush of employees. Malik's usual presence at company headquarters commanded nods of respect and quickened steps. Here, no one glanced his way. The irony wasn't lost on him. He had always insisted every employee mattered, yet here he was, invisible. Michael, right? Doris, the veteran receptionist he was shadowing, greeted him. She was a short, stout woman with a warm smile that didn't quite reach her tired eyes. "That's me," Malik replied, adjusting his name tag. "Good. I hope you're ready. This place can be a circus." Within minutes, Malik was bombarded with tasks, answering phones, sorting mail, greeting visitors, and managing an influx of delivery packages. The desk felt more chaotic than the boardroom. "Hey, Doris," Malik said during a lull, "is it always this hectic?" Doris snorted. "This is a slow day. Wait until Monday." She gave him a sidelong glance. "Stick around long enough, and you'll see. This place, it's not what it seems." The first cracks. By mid-morning, Malik began noticing unsettling patterns. 2 senior managers loitered by the reception desk, discussing a company-wide email on efficiency measures. "Can you believe this? They want more productivity with fewer resources," one grumbled. "Typical. Let the grunts handle it. We got bigger things to deal with," the other replied, laughing. Malik's hands froze on the keyboard. Grunts? The dismissive tone stung. Was this how management viewed employees? The day continued with similar revelations. In the break room, Malik overheard a heated conversation between 2 employees. "They're cutting our overtime again," a woman said, her voice trembling with anger. "How am I supposed to pay my bills?" "HR won't do a thing," her coworker replied. They're all in bed with upper management. The bitterness in their voices was undeniable. Malik clenched his fists, a mix of shame and frustration bubbling within him. He had trusted his leadership team to maintain Vision Corps' values, but the culture had spiraled into something toxic and hostile. A shocking encounter. Later that afternoon, Malik had his first interaction with Linda Shaw, a senior manager whose name frequently appeared in glowing reports. He had always considered her a cornerstone of the company. "Receptionist, huh?" Linda said, walking up to the desk. Her sharp heels clicked against the marble floor as she eyed Malik. "Yes, ma'am," he replied, keeping his voice neutral. "Well, you're doing a terrible job," she snapped. "The desk looks like a tornado hit it. Phones are ringing off the hook, and you're just standing there. Pathetic." Her words were like a slap. Malik bit his tongue, resisting the urge to retaliate. As she stormed off, Doris leaned over. "Don't take it personally. That's just Linda." Malik's stomach churned. This wasn't just a bad day for Linda. It was a glimpse into a deeper problem. The unsung heroes. By the end of the day, Malik's shoulders ached and his head throbbed. Yet amid the chaos, 2 employees caught his attention. Angela, a senior accountant, and Henry, an IT specialist, stood out for their dedication and kindness. Angela worked tirelessly, staying late to perfect quarterly reports. When a coworker mentioned her daughter's recital, her face briefly crumbled with guilt before she forced a smile. Henry, meanwhile, was a beacon of positivity. Malik watched him patiently help a panicked intern troubleshoot a computer issue, turning the experience into a teaching moment. These were the people holding Vision Corps together, not the managers barking orders or laughing in the break room. Reflection. That night, Malik sat in his modest hotel room, replaying the day's events in his mind. The toxic behaviors he witnessed weren't isolated incidents. They were systemic. Worse, they thrived under the radar because employees like Angela and Henry weren't being recognized. Malik scribbled notes in his journal. Promote meritocracy. Evaluate leadership integrity. Create anonymous reporting channels. Recognize hidden talent. This was only the beginning. Malik vowed that by the end of his undercover journey, Vision Corps would be a place where every employee felt valued and where no one felt invisible. But he still had more to uncover. The deeper he went, the more troubling truths awaited him. A shadow in the mirror. Malik arrived at the Virginia office the following morning, bracing himself for another day at the front lines of his own company. The brisk morning air carried a sense of urgency as he adjusted his glasses and stepped inside. Though Malik looked every bit the unassuming receptionist, his mind raced with questions. What other cracks would he uncover today? The reality of the role. As Malik settled into his station, Doris handed him a stack of messages and a rundown of the day's tasks. "It's payroll day," she warned, her voice tinged with weariness. "Brace yourself for the complaints." Complaints rolled in, just as she predicted. Employees approached the desk, some with frustration barely contained, others with outright anger. Malik listened patiently as one after another shared stories of paycheck errors and inconsistent overtime compensation. What's the point of HR if they never fix anything? An employee named Mark muttered bitterly as he stormed away. Malik's chest tightened. If basic needs like fair pay weren't being met, how could he expect employees to feel motivated or satisfied? The desk, which initially seemed a hub of routine tasks, now felt like the pulse of the company, a constant reminder of its flaws. The silent disconnect. Mid-morning, Malik watched Linda stride through the lobby, her sharp heels announcing her presence before she spoke. Her gaze swept over the room with the same air of superiority she had displayed the previous day. As she passed by a group of junior staff chatting near the coffee machine, she sneered audibly. "Do they ever work, or is this a daycare?" she said under her breath, but loud enough to be heard. The group immediately dispersed, heads down, their camaraderie crushed in an instant. Malik felt a wave of anger rise in his chest. Linda's words weren't just dismissive. They were poisonous. Not long after, Doris leaned in close. Linda's been here for years, but she's gotten worse lately. Thinks she's untouchable. Malik frowned, his mind racing. He had always viewed Linda as a model employee, but her behavior painted a different picture, one of entitlement and unchecked authority. A glimmer of hope. By noon, Malik's focus shifted as he noticed a quiet but determined presence at the desk across from his. Angela sat hunched over her computer, her fingers flying across the keyboard as she worked through financial reports. Malik observed her interactions carefully. Despite her obvious workload, Angela took time to answer questions from less experienced coworkers, her tone patient and kind. At one point, a junior accountant nervously approached her desk with a thick folder. "Angela, I'm so sorry to bother you, but I don't know how to reconcile these accounts." Angela smiled, though the weariness in her eyes was evident. "No problem, Jamie. Let me show you." As she walked Jamie through the process, Malik felt a pang of guilt. Angela was the kind of employee Vision Corps should have been celebrating. Instead, she was overlooked and overworked. The hidden threat. After lunch, Malik found himself caught in a tense moment at the front desk. A delivery man arrived with a package, his face set in a scowl. "This is for Linda Shaw," he said, shoving the clipboard at Malik. Doris glanced at the package, her face paling. "That's not standard delivery protocol," she whispered to Malik. Before he could respond, Linda appeared, her expression sharp. "What's the holdup?" she barked, grabbing the package without a glance at Malik or Doris. The interaction left Malik uneasy. He filed it away in his mind, knowing that something about it didn't sit right. The unseen battle. Later in the afternoon, Malik found himself in the break room, refilling his water bottle. Two employees stood near the vending machines, their conversation low but intense. "You heard about the threats, right?" one whispered. "Yeah," the other replied, glancing nervously around. "But HR's not doing anything. People are scared to even report it." Malik's ears perked up. "Threats?" He stayed rooted in place, straining to catch more. "They're saying someone's been blackmailing employees," the first person continued, "using personal stuff to keep people quiet." Malik's heart sank. This was more than just a toxic culture. This was outright sabotage. As the employees left, Malik's mind raced. Who was behind this? And why? The first clue. By the end of the day, Malik's exhaustion was palpable, but he couldn't stop thinking about what he had overheard. He needed answers. On his way out, he noticed Henry, the IT specialist, working late at his desk. Malik approached him. "Henry, right?" he said casually. Henry looked up, startled but friendly. "That's me. You're the new guy, Michael." Malik nodded. "Yeah. Can I ask you something? Have you noticed anything unusual around here lately?" Henry hesitated, his brow furrowing. "Unusual how?" "Like strange behavior, people acting different, or maybe being pressured." Henry's eyes darted around the room, and he lowered his voice. "Look, I don't know much, but there's been talk. Some people are scared. And I've seen a few weird logins on the network, accounts being accessed after hours. I flagged it, but no one's done anything about it." Malik's pulse quickened. "Do you have records of those logins?" Henry hesitated again, then nodded. "Yeah. But why are you asking?" Malik smiled faintly. "Let's just say I'm trying to figure out what's going on here." The weight of leadership. That night, Malik sat in his hotel room, piecing together the day's revelations. The problems at Vision Corps ran deeper than he had imagined. It wasn't just about toxic managers or undervalued employees. It was about fear, manipulation, and a system that had failed to protect its people. He pulled out his journal and began jotting down notes. Investigate suspicious activity on the network. Identify the source of employee blackmail. Develop a system for anonymous complaints. Reassess management accountability. As Malik closed his journal, A sense of determination filled him. The path ahead would be difficult, but he owed it to his employees to fix the mess he had unknowingly allowed to grow. The morning after, Malik arrived at the office early the next morning, his mind still swirling with questions. He greeted Doris with a smile and settled into his station. As the morning rush began, Linda passed by the desk, her demeanor colder than ever. Malik couldn't shake the feeling that she was hiding something. By mid-morning, Henry approached the desk discreetly, a USB drive in hand. "Here's what I found," he whispered. Malik took the drive, his heart pounding. "Thanks, Henry. I'll look into it." As Henry walked away, Malik felt the weight of the responsibility he carried. He wasn't just uncovering cracks in the system. He was stepping into a shadowy world of secrets and lies. The next move would be crucial, and Malik was determined to make it count. This wasn't just about saving Vision Corps anymore. It was about protecting the people who made it what it was and confronting the forces trying to tear it apart. Into the shadows, Malik sat at his desk, the USB drive Henry had handed him feeling heavier than it should. His instincts screamed that this wasn't just another bump in the road for Vision Corps. This was a full-blown crisis. The drive could contain the clues he needed to unravel the sabotage and manipulation festering within his company. He waited until lunch break, when Doris stepped out for her usual walk. Once the lobby was empty, Malik inserted the drive into his computer and opened the folder marked Suspicious Activity Logs. A series of documents appeared, filled with timestamps, IP addresses, and employee account names. Malik frowned. Most of the activity seemed mundane: logins, file access, and document edits. But a few entries stood out: late-night access to sensitive employee files, unusual patterns of email forwarding, and edits to HR complaint records were all logged under an unfamiliar account name: Xavier Bennett, the phantom employee. The name caught Malik off guard. He didn't remember hiring anyone named Xavier Bennett. He opened the company directory and searched for the name. Nothing. No employee profile, no records of employment, no trace of this person anywhere. His mind raced. Was this an external hacker? Or was someone internally using a fake identity to access private information? Malik's stomach churned. The idea that his company had been infiltrated from the inside was unsettling. Determined to get to the bottom of it, he copied the data to his phone and deleted the trace of his activity from the receptionist's computer. As he shut down the screen, Doris returned, her cheerful demeanor masking the exhaustion Malik had come to recognize in many employees. "Busy morning?" she asked. "You could say that," Malik replied, forcing a smile. The web of fear. Later that afternoon, Malik noticed Linda again, her presence as sharp and grating as ever. She was meeting with two other senior managers in the glass-walled conference room just beyond the reception desk. Though Malik couldn't hear their conversation, their animated gestures and intense expressions spoke volumes. Linda's posture exuded dominance as she pointed at a stack of papers in front of her. The two managers nodded, their body language deferential. Malik narrowed his eyes, wondering if Linda's power extended further than he had initially realized. Was she complicit in the toxic culture, or was there more to her story? As the meeting ended, one of the managers, a tall man with a nervous demeanor, approached Malik at the desk. "Hey, Michael, right?" he said, glancing around. "That's me," Malik replied, keeping his tone neutral. The man leaned in closer. "You've been doing good here. Just, be careful. People like Linda, well, let's just say she doesn't like things out of her control." Before Malik could respond, the man hurried away, leaving Malik more confused than ever. The employee underground. By evening, Malik had started piecing together fragments of a larger puzzle. He couldn't shake the feeling that some employees knew more than they were letting on, and he needed to find a way to earn their trust. That night, he decided to stay late, feigning an effort to catch up on front desk duties. As the office emptied, he noticed Angela working diligently at her desk, her expression focused but weary. Malik approached her cautiously. "Burning the midnight oil?" he asked with a smile. Angela glanced up, surprised. "Guess I don't have much of a choice. Quarterly reports are due, and if they're not perfect, I'll hear about it tomorrow." Her words carried a hint of bitterness. Malik hesitated, then asked, "Do you ever feel like things here aren't right?" Angela froze, her eyes scanning the empty office. "What do you mean?" "I mean, like certain people aren't being treated fairly, or that there's more going on than meets the eye." Angela stared at him for a long moment, then sighed. "Look, Michael, you seem like a decent guy, but you don't know how things work here. People who speak up, they don't last. It's easier to keep your head down and do your job." "But doesn't that bother you?" Malik pressed gently. "Of course it does," Angela admitted, her voice trembling. "But what am I supposed to do? HR doesn't care, and management only listens to people like Linda. I've been here for 8 years, and I've been passed over for promotions more times than I can count." Malik nodded, his respect for Angela growing. She wasn't just hardworking, she was resilient. And yet, her potential was being stifled by a system that rewarded favoritism over merit. The midnight confession. Before leaving, Malik stopped by Henry's desk. The IT specialist was still there, tinkering with a server issue. "Hey, Henry," Malik said. "Thanks for the logs earlier. They were eye-opening." Henry gave a small smile. "Figured they might be. Anything else you need?" Malik hesitated, then asked, "Do you think there's someone here deliberately causing problems?" Henry's expression darkened. He glanced around to ensure they were alone before replying. "Look, I've seen things. Weird things. Accounts being accessed at odd hours, files disappearing, complaints being edited or deleted. It's not just Linda. It's bigger than her. And I think whoever's behind it doesn't want the truth getting out." "Do you have any idea who it might be?" Malik asked. Henry hesitated. "No, but there's this name that keeps popping up. Xavier Bennett. Ever heard of him?" Malik shook his head, pretending not to know. "No, but I'll keep an eye out." Henry sighed. "Be careful, Michael. People who dig too deep around here tend to regret it." The turning point. That night, Malik returned to his hotel room, his mind spinning. The name Xavier Bennett loomed large in his thoughts, a shadowy figure whose presence seemed to touch every corner of the Virginia office. But who was he? And what was his endgame? Malik reviewed the logs again, focusing on the suspicious account activity. One entry caught his attention, a late-night login from a computer in the main conference room. The timestamp matched the same night Linda had hosted a closed-door meeting with several department heads. He leaned back in his chair, a grim realization dawning. Linda wasn't just complicit in the toxic culture. She might be a key player in whatever scheme was unfolding. But Malik knew he couldn't confront her yet. He needed more evidence, more allies. For now, he would continue to play the role of Michael Fields, the unassuming receptionist. But beneath the surface, Malik Johnson, CEO of Vision Corp, was preparing for battle. The shadows within his company were deep, but Malik was determined to bring them into the light. What he didn't realize was just how dangerous the truth would be. The tightening noose. Malik arrived early at the office the next morning, the weight of the previous day's discoveries pressing heavily on him. The logs on the USB drive and Henry's warnings painted a picture of a company unraveling from within. Toxic leadership was bad enough, but the evidence of manipulation and sabotage hinted at something darker, something threatening the very foundation of Vision Corp. He stepped into the lobby, now fully immersed in his role as Michael Fields, the temporary receptionist. Today, he was determined to dig deeper into the shadowy figure of Xavier Bennett and the growing web of fear that seemed to grip the employees. Malik adjusted his glasses, took a deep breath, and prepared for whatever the day might reveal. A pattern emerges. Mid-morning, while juggling phone calls and sorting mail, Malik noticed something peculiar. Linda Shaw spent more time in the main conference room than in her office. For the third time that week, she marched past the reception desk with a folder clutched tightly in her hand, her sharp heels echoing against the marble floor. "She's always holed up in there lately," Doris murmured, her tone laced with suspicion. "Any idea what she's working on?" Malik asked casually. "Beats me. Whatever it is, she's not sharing it with the rest of us." Linda's increasing secrecy didn't sit right with Malik. Was she orchestrating something larger, or was she covering her tracks? Either way, he knew he needed to get into that conference room. A cry for help. As Malik mulled over his next move, a young woman approached the desk. She looked nervous, clutching a notebook to her chest. "Hi," she said softly. "I'm Mia, one of the interns. Can I ask you something?" "Of course," Malik replied, offering a reassuring smile. Mia hesitated, glancing around before leaning in closer. "Is it true that someone's been blackmailing people here?" The question caught Malik off guard. He leaned forward, lowering his voice. "Why do you ask?" "I overheard some of the other interns talking," Mia whispered. "One of them said they got an anonymous email threatening to expose something personal unless they deleted a complaint they filed with HR." Malik's jaw tightened. This was the clearest evidence yet of active sabotage within the company. "Do you know who it was?" he asked. Mia shook her head. "They won't say. They're too scared." Malik thanked her, his mind racing. Whoever was behind the blackmail was targeting employees at their most vulnerable, weaponizing their secrets to maintain control. This wasn't just about a toxic work culture anymore. This was personal and calculated. The conference room break-in. That afternoon, an opportunity presented itself. Linda left the building for a meeting downtown, leaving the main conference room empty. Malik waited until Doris was distracted with a visitor, then slipped toward the glass-walled room. The door was locked, but Malik had anticipated this. He pulled a thin metal tool from his pocket, a habit he picked up in his younger, scrappier days, and jiggled the lock. Within moments, it clicked open. Malik stepped inside, his heart pounding. The conference room was immaculate, with sleek furniture and state-of-the-art equipment. But Malik's attention was drawn to the folders stacked neatly on the table. He opened the first one, scanning its contents. Inside were records of employee complaints, but something was off. Many of the documents had handwritten annotations in the margins, instructions to downplay, redirect, or delete specific grievances. Malik's stomach churned. Linda, or someone under her direction, had been systematically suppressing employee voices. One folder in particular caught his eye. It was marked confidential. Xavier Bennett. Malik's hands trembled as he opened it. Inside were copies of emails, all originating from an encrypted address linked to Xavier Bennett. The messages were chilling. "Remove the complaint, or the photos will be sent to your family. Speak up again, and your employment file will be flagged for misconduct. Stay quiet if you know what's good for you." The tone was cold, calculated, and untraceable. Malik's chest tightened. Someone within Vision Corps had created this false identity to instill fear and silence dissent. The name wasn't just a pseudonym. It was a weapon. A sudden interruption. As Malik photographed the documents with his phone, he heard footsteps approaching. Panic surged through him. He quickly returned the folders to their original positions and slipped out of the room, closing the door behind him just as Linda appeared at the end of the hallway. Her sharp eyes scanned the corridor, landing briefly on Malik. "What are you doing back here?" she demanded. "Just delivering some mail," Malik said, holding up an envelope as if it were his purpose all along. Linda's gaze lingered on him, suspicion evident. "Don't let me catch you snooping around where you don't belong," she snapped before storming into the conference room. Malik exhaled, his heart still pounding. He had narrowly avoided being caught, but the evidence he had uncovered was worth the risk. The anonymous ally. That evening, Malik decided to confide in Henry. He found the IT specialist at his desk, working late as usual. "Henry," Malik began, lowering his voice. "I need your help." Henry looked up, his expression wary. "What kind of help?" Malik hesitated, then showed him the photos of the documents he had taken. Henry's eyes widened as he scanned the images. This is serious," Henry said, his voice barely above a whisper. "You're saying Linda's involved in this?" "I don't think she's the mastermind," Malik replied. "But she's definitely complicit. And whoever's behind Xavier Bennett is using fear to keep people in line." Henry leaned back in his chair, rubbing his temples. "We need to expose this. But we have to be careful. If Linda finds out, she'll bury us." Malik nodded. "Can you trace the encrypted emails? Maybe find out who's really behind them?" Henry hesitated, then nodded. "I can try. But if I do this, you have to promise me one thing." "What's that?" "That you'll protect the people who've been hurt by this. They deserve justice." Malik met Henry's gaze, his resolve hardening. "I promise." The catalyst. The next day, Malik noticed a shift in the office atmosphere. Employees were more subdued than usual, their conversations hushed and tense. Whispers of the blackmail had spread, and the fear was palpable. During lunch, Doris leaned over to Malik. "You hear about Angela?" she asked. Malik's stomach dropped. "What about her?" "She called in sick today. But rumor has it, she's quitting. Said she couldn't take it anymore." Malik's chest tightened. Angela had been one of the brightest lights in an otherwise bleak office environment. Losing her would be a devastating blow, not just for Vision Corps, but for Malik personally. He couldn't let this continue. The plan. That evening, Malik gathered his thoughts. It was time to act. He couldn't confront Linda or expose Xavier Bennett without solid proof, but he also couldn't sit idly by while his employees suffered. He opened his journal and outlined a plan. Work with Henry to trace the encrypted emails and identify the true culprit. Convene a secret meeting with key employees like Angela and Mia to build trust and gather first-hand accounts. Engage the board discreetly to ensure upper management was prepared for the fallout. Create a new reporting system that bypassed compromised channels like HR. As Malik closed his journal, a sense of clarity washed over him. The battle ahead would be fierce, but he was ready. He had started this journey to uncover the truth, and now he had a mission: to dismantle the toxic structures within Vision Corps and rebuild it into the company he had always envisioned. What he didn't yet realize was just how deep the conspiracy ran, and how much danger he was walking into. Conspiracy in the shadows. The tension at Vision Corps' Virginia office was nearly tangible as Malik arrived early the next morning. He carried the weight of mounting evidence, a growing sense of urgency, and a determination to act. But he knew he couldn't make a move without understanding the full scope of what he was up against. Whoever had created the shadowy persona of Xavier Bennett wasn't just undermining the company. They were orchestrating a campaign of fear. Malik needed answers, and he needed allies. Angela's unexpected return. To Malik's surprise, Angela returned to the office. She arrived later than usual, her face drawn and pale, her movements more hesitant than usual. Malik approached her cautiously. "Angela, it's good to see you." "I wasn't sure you'd be back," he said gently. She gave a weak smile. "I almost didn't come, but I couldn't leave without tying up loose ends. Are you okay?" Malik pressed, lowering his voice. Angela hesitated, then sighed. "Not really. Yesterday, I got an email. It was personal. Too personal." Malik's chest tightened. "Was it from Xavier Bennett?" Angela's eyes widened. "How do you know about that?" "Let's just say I've been piecing things together," Malik replied. "Can you tell me what the email said?" Angela hesitated, glancing around to ensure they weren't being overheard. "It was about my daughter. It mentioned her school, her routine. It wasn't just a threat to me. It was a threat to my family. They told me to stop asking questions and keep my head down." Malik's blood ran cold. Whoever was behind, this wasn't just targeting employees. They were targeting their families. This was far more sinister than he had imagined. The secret meeting. That afternoon, Malik discreetly arranged a meeting with Angela, Mia, Henry, and 2 other employees who had expressed concerns about the company's culture. They gathered in a small, unused conference room, their voices hushed and their faces tense. "I know everyone here is scared," Malik began, keeping his tone calm but firm. "But I need you to trust me. I've been looking into what's happening, and I believe we can stop it, together." Henry chimed in. "I've been tracking the encrypted emails. Whoever Xavier Bennett is, they're using our internal network. They're not an outsider. They're one of us." The room fell silent as the weight of Henry's words sank in. Malik continued, "We need to work together to expose this, but I need your help. Any information you have, emails, threats, incidents, could make the difference." Angela nodded slowly. "I'll share what I have. But you need to promise us something." "What's that?" Malik asked. "That you'll protect us. If this goes wrong, we could lose everything," she said, her voice trembling. Malik met her gaze, his resolve unshaken. "I promise." Henry's breakthrough. Later that evening, Malik met with Henry in the IT department. The office was nearly empty, the faint hum of servers the only sound as Henry worked diligently at his computer. "I think I've got something," Henry said, his voice tinged with excitement and apprehension. "What is it?" Malik asked, leaning over his shoulder. Henry pointed to a series of logs on his screen. The encrypted emails were sent from a device registered to Linda Shaw. Malik's stomach dropped. "Linda." Henry nodded. "The IP address matches her office computer. But here's the weird part. Some of the activity happened while Linda wasn't in the building." Malik frowned. "So someone else is using her credentials." "Exactly. Either Linda's in on it, or someone's framing her." Malik's mind raced. If Linda was being framed, it could explain her increasingly erratic behavior. But if she was involved, then her outward confidence masked a deeply calculated role in the conspiracy. "Can you trace the network activity further?" Malik asked. Henry hesitated. "I can try, but it'll take time. And if anyone notices me poking around, it could raise red flags." "Do it," Malik said firmly. "But be careful. If they realize we're onto them, they'll escalate." Linda's true colors. The next morning, Linda confronted Malik at the reception desk. Her expression was cold, her tone sharp. "I don't know who you think you are," she snapped, "but I've seen you snooping around. Stay out of things that don't concern you." Malik kept his composure, meeting her glare with calm resolve. "I'm just doing my job, Mom." Linda scoffed. "Your job is to answer phones, not to meddle. Don't forget that." As she stormed off, Malik felt a flicker of doubt. Was Linda lashing out because she was guilty, or because she was being targeted herself? Either way, her behavior was drawing attention, and not the kind she wanted. The trap is set. That evening, Malik and Henry devised a plan. They would create a false lead, an email sent from a dummy account, hinting at a whistleblower who was about to go public. If the perpetrator took the bait, it could reveal their identity. Henry worked late into the night, crafting the email and embedding a tracking code that would pinpoint the recipient's location and device. Once it was ready, he hit send. "Now we wait," Henry said, his voice heavy with anticipation. The revelation. The next day, as Malik worked the front desk, Henry sent him a discreet message. They bit. "Come to my desk." Malik hurried to the IT department, where Henry was hunched over his computer, his expression grim. "The email was opened this morning," Henry said, "and it wasn't Linda. It was accessed from an unused workstation in the server room." "Who has access to the server room?" Malik asked. "Technically, just me and the senior management team," Henry replied. "But anyone with the right credentials could get in." Malik's heart raced. The pieces were falling into place, but the picture was still incomplete. Whoever was behind Xavier Bennett had access to sensitive areas of the company, and was using fear as a weapon to maintain control. The final piece. That afternoon, Malik noticed something unusual. Doris, the receptionist who had guided him through his first days undercover, was acting strangely. She avoided eye contact, her usual warmth replaced by a nervous edge. "Doris, is everything okay?" Malik asked gently. She hesitated, then whispered, "Can we talk after hours? Somewhere private?" Malik nodded, his curiosity piqued. That evening, they met at a nearby cafe, where Doris finally opened up. "I've been here for years," she began, her voice trembling. "I've seen things, heard things, and lately it's gotten worse." "What do you mean?" Malik pressed. Doris glanced around, lowering her voice further. "I think Linda's being set up. She's tough, but she's not the mastermind. There's someone else pulling the strings." "Who?" Malik asked, leaning in. Doris shook her head. "I don't know, but I've seen someone hanging around the server room late at night. A man, tall, with dark hair. He doesn't work here, not officially, anyway." Malik's pulse quickened. This was the break he needed. The shadowy figure behind Xavier Bennett wasn't just a faceless hacker, it was someone operating within the walls of Vision Corps. And now, Malik had a description to work with. The next move. As Malik returned to his hotel that night, his mind raced. The conspiracy was unraveling, but the stakes were higher than ever. Whoever was behind Xavier Bennett wasn't just sabotaging the company, they were endangering lives. Malik opened his journal and wrote down his next steps. Identify the man in the server room. Confront Linda and determine her role. Expose Xavier Bennett to the board. Rebuild trust and protect the employees. The battle wasn't over, but Malik could see the endgame approaching. The truth was within reach, and he was determined to bring it to light, no matter the cost. Unmasking the puppet master. Malik's final day undercover at Vision Corps began with a quiet determination. The pieces of the puzzle were almost complete. An anonymous figure pulling the strings, a toxic culture being used as a shield for deeper sabotage, and a pervasive sense of fear choking the very life out of the company. What began as a quest to address a drop in employee satisfaction had morphed into a battle to save the company from destruction, and Malik wasn't about to lose. The day started with Malik blending in as usual, answering phones and directing visitors, but inside, his thoughts churned. The description Doris had provided of the mysterious man in the server room, tall, dark-haired, not an official employee, lingered in his mind. Who was he? And how had he infiltrated Vision Corps? The meeting that changed everything. Malik spent the morning monitoring Linda's movements. Her behavior had grown more erratic. Her sharp demeanor was now tinged with visible anxiety. She snapped at employees, her usual control slipping. By midday, she summoned a group of senior managers to the conference room. Henry, who had been tracking network activity, sent Malik a quick message. "She's using the server room access credentials right now. Be careful." Malik knew he couldn't wait any longer. He discreetly followed Linda's team into the conference room, pretending to deliver a file. As the door swung open, Malik overheard snippets of their conversation. "This has to stop," one manager said, his voice trembling. "If this gets out, it'll ruin us." "It won't get out," Linda snapped. "As long as we stick to the plan." Malik froze. What plan? He quickly moved out of sight, his mind racing. Linda wasn't the mastermind, but she was deeply involved, either through complicity or coercion. He needed to expose the truth before she caused further damage. The Midnight Watcher. That evening, Malik stayed late under the pretense of covering Doris's evening shift. Henry had tipped him off that the server room had seen unusual activity logged again. Malik waited until most employees had left before making his move. The building was eerily quiet as he made his way to the lower level where the server room was located. As he approached the room, his heart pounded. The faint glow of a monitor illuminated the room, and inside, he saw a tall man, dark-haired, hunched over a keyboard. Malik's instincts screamed at him to turn back, but he pressed forward. He stepped into the room, his voice steady. "Who are you?" The man whirled around, his face shadowed but his eyes sharp. "You shouldn't be here," he said, his tone cold. "I could say the same about you," Malik replied, stepping closer. "You're not an employee. So why are you here?" The man smirked. "You don't know, do you? You're just another pawn, running errands for a company that's already dead." Malik's blood ran cold. "What are you talking about?" The man straightened, his confidence unnerving. "This company has been a rotting shell for years. Your leadership didn't create innovation, it created stagnation. People like me, we're just accelerating the inevitable." "Who are you?" Malik demanded again, his voice rising. The man took a step closer, the dim light finally revealing his face. "The name's irrelevant. But if you must know, I'm the one you've been chasing. Xavier Bennett." The revelation. Malik stared at the man, his mind racing. Xavier Bennett wasn't just a pseudonym. It was a living, breathing entity with access to Vision Corps' deepest secrets. "What do you want?" Malik asked, forcing himself to stay calm. "Leverage," Xavier replied. "Information is power. And this company, it's a gold mine. I've been pulling strings for months, gathering secrets, creating chaos. Every complaint, every blackmail email, it all feeds the narrative I'm building." "You're destroying lives," Malik said, his voice trembling with controlled anger. "No," Xavier said with a smirk. "I'm offering them freedom. From a broken system, from leaders who don't care about them. They just don't see it yet." "You're not liberating anyone," Malik shot back. "You're just exploiting them." Before Xavier could respond, the sound of footsteps echoed in the hallway. Malik turned to see Henry and Angela standing in the doorway, their faces set with determination. "Your game is over," Henry said, holding up a tablet. "We've been tracking your activity for weeks. Every email, every login. It's all here." Angela stepped forward, her voice steady despite the fear in her eyes. "You've hurt too many people. We won't let you do it anymore." The confrontation. Xavier's confidence wavered for the first time. "You think you've won? Even if you expose me, the damage is done. This company is already crumbling." "Maybe," Malik said, stepping closer. "But we're going to rebuild it, and we're going to start by holding you accountable." Xavier lunged for the keyboard, but Malik and Henry moved quickly, restraining him while Angela secured the computer. They called security, who arrived moments later to escort Xavier out of the building. As Xavier was led away, he cast one last smirk over his shoulder. "Good luck cleaning up this mess." The fallout. The next morning, Malik shed his disguise. He walked into the Virginia office as himself, Malik Johnson, CEO of Vision Corps. Employees stared, whispers spreading like wildfire. Malik called an emergency all-staff meeting, his heart pounding as he stood before the gathered crowd. "I owe you all an apology," Malik began, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "I failed you as a leader. I thought Vision Corps was thriving, but I've come to see that our culture has become toxic, and many of you have suffered because of it. That ends today." He explained his undercover investigation, revealing the sabotage orchestrated by Xavier Bennett and the complicity of certain managers, including Linda. He promised sweeping changes, transparent policies, a new reporting system, and a renewed commitment to employee well-being. The rebuild. Over the following weeks, Malik worked tirelessly to rebuild Vision Corps. Linda resigned under pressure, and a full audit of the company's practices revealed systemic issues that were immediately addressed. Angela was promoted to a senior role, overseeing employee engagement initiatives. Henry became the head of its security, tasked with preventing future breaches. The company's culture began to shift. Employees felt heard, valued, and protected. Malik implemented open forums, regular check-ins, and merit-based promotions. Slowly but surely, Vision Corps began to heal. The reflection. Months later, Malik stood in his office, gazing out at the skyline. The journey had been grueling, but it had also been transformative. Vision Corps wasn't perfect, but it was on the path to becoming the company he had always envisioned, a place where every employee mattered and where integrity was more than just a buzzword. As Malik turned back to his desk, his phone buzzed with a notification. It was an email from Angela, simply titled, "Thank you." Smiling, Malik opened the message. It was short but powerful. "Because of you, we finally have hope." And for the first time in a long while, Malik felt the same.